Welcome back to another episode of the Design, Build, Hunt podcast, which is presented by Whitetail Partners. Today, I've got Sam and Tim from Wisconsin on the line with me. How are you doing, guys?
Good.
Doing good, Josh.
Good. Glad you guys could join me. Full disclosure, Tim's fighting one of those summertime colds. So if he sounds a little deeper than normal, that's where he's at. Sam's just getting over one. So far, I've avoided that, but I guess it could be coming for me at any moment now. So
you got to get it out of the way before the season starts, Josh.
That's right. That's right. And one thing none of us are doing is taking any sick days right now because we know what those are going to be used for. But we don't have to air too much of that out on the podcast here. So, well, guys, we're right up against the hunting season. I am starting here in Georgia September 14th. You guys are starting in Wisconsin September 14th. Not a lot of time left. I'm starting to get some questions, though, about guys who are either picking up new leases, guys who are buying properties. I actually had a potential client call me yesterday and say, hey, I'm closing on this property in the next couple of weeks. What can I do for food plots? We don't have food plots on the property. And for whatever reason, we're at a time where we're time crunched, right, on trying to get food plots in, but they're also trying to do it on a budget because this is going to be a quick thing. They're not even sure if these are going to be food plots they want to plant on into the future. They don't have time to have a consultant out to talk about placement. They're just going to plant what they can right now. So I thought we could talk about planting food plots cheap and easy and fast, kind of as a last minute ordeal. Does that sound like a topic you guys can tackle?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, first of all, let's talk about this. North to south, you guys obviously are working with a much tighter deadline than I would be. I've got guys here in the south who are saying, hey, it's last minute, but we could reasonably plant probably up to close to Halloween. We actually planted our food plots Halloween weekend last year on our property down in Alabama. So we've got a lot more time than you guys have. What's the latest you think folks should be planting up there where you are?
Well, Josh, I think it varies a lot across the state. Tim's further north than I. So, Tim, I'll let you kind of take what guys are doing up there, and then I'll talk about down here.
Yeah, like you said, Sam, the state, the way it's set up, I mean, if you're talking a difference between the southern part of the state and all the way up in the northern part, you're talking about a big difference of a couple weeks in how far the season progresses. So for me, I'm kind of in that central part of the state as far as north to south. And depending on what we're planting, of course, if we're looking at those beans, things like that, we want to have, peas, for example, we want to have those in by Labor Day. But if you're talking, maybe you're looking at some kind of a grain, a rye, for example, I think you could probably get away with that up till about October 1st at the very latest in this part of the state. But then, like I mentioned, as you go north, you're probably moving that timeline forward, probably 2 weeks, where I'd be looking at the middle of September is the very latest. I try to get something like that in.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think on forage products that you're trying to get, a good amount of growth on, you want to get those in as soon as you can. Obviously, I mean, we're past the point now where it's, is it too early type of time frame? But I'd say as long as you're getting those in by early September, you have a chance of producing something. Like a brassica, you may not produce as much on the bulb, but keep in mind what you buy too. There's products out there, late season brassica blends, for example, that are fantastic. That they grow quicker, they have a little bit more bulb to them, and you're going to get more out of them. So be careful in what you're selecting on that. Talk with your food plot seed provider. John Comp does a great job for us in answering those questions, and he has that late season blend with Northwoods Whitetails. But for us, I look at it and say we can plant that in the south, southern part of the state or northern Illinois. Those rye grain, get that in is like you said, even into October if you want to. You can get something green growing into October, and that'll still grow between the frosts, but you get much later than that, it's probably better to stay out of the woods and just hunt the best spots you have.
Right.
Yes, Sam, and I think to follow up on that, I think it's important for us to remember, and I try to teach myself this every year, is we're hunters, right? We're not farmers, and it's not an all or nothing thing. So if we can get something growing, if it's that last
Right.
minute lease, even if it's not Instagram worthy, perfect plot, if we're starting to get something green that's different than what's out there, it's still going to help. So, it's never too late. I shouldn't say it's never too late, but you can get something going. It's still better than not doing anything at all.
That's right. And I'm a
Yeah, there's plenty of weeds in my food plots to prove your point right, Tim.
hey,
Deer don't care.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan of dirty food plots. People call me concerned with, this year we actually had a client with a lot of clover, and he ended up with a lot of dog fennel up around the edges of his food plots, which are these big, tall, stemmy plants. And he was like, "What should I do with them?" I said, "Enjoy the free screening cover. That's what you should."
I was going to say mine's like that screen all over the place
Yeah.
because it is. I got head high weeds in my beans that you can't see around right now.
Right, right. So my feelings
It's all good.
that too much, but I do just want to just real quick. You mentioned Northwoods Whitetails and the stuff that you've gotten from them. We planted some screening cover from John pretty late.
Mhm.
The client was a little late on closing on a property, so we got the screening cover in. I just went and checked on it. I don't know how many days of growth exactly it was, but I know we planted it about a month after we would have liked, and that stuff is 6 and 7 feet tall already. In
Yeah, that stuff has a lot shorter growing season than some people give it credit for. I think, the biggest mistake you have with that product is planting it too early. Last year I planted mine as late as 4th of July and it's
right,
still going to get enough height on it. Now, you may want to you want to get the fully developed mass so that it can stand up later in the season. But at the same time, you can plant that stuff a lot later and you want warm soil, you want good weed control. All of those things are more important than the earliness of it. And as far as it pertains to our conversation today, screening products are not something you're getting in the ground now.
no,
If anything, what you're doing is prepping for next year.
right.
If you know where you want to have a screen, get that area mowed, get it sprayed, start to get it down to dirt so that you're in a better spot for next spring.
Right, right. Very good point. Very good point. And don't let the name though Northwoods Whitetails fool you when it comes to the seed. This is a far south Georgia property, so far south that we were concerned when I was going back down about the hurricane recently, and so we were
Mhm.
we were way down by the coast and still getting good growth. But anyway, so shifting back to our food plot conversation, uh, I had a client last year who bought a property in December, and I was there on site doing a consultation with him in December. He had just planted his food plots in December. Now this is down near the Okefenokee Swamp, if you guys know where that's at, basically Florida. It's North Disneyland, pretty much. So it's way down there. But um, you know these guys are having success. Our growing season is much later and what we can get away with, especially once you get down near the coast. As you move up north, September 1st, September 15th is probably about when you want to be having things in the ground. But so let's talk about getting these food plots in on a budget then. So guys that are running last minute, they probably don't have access to a ton of materials that or a ton of equipment right off the bat that they want to get going. So if I just said, "Hey, where do I start when I'm trying to do a food plot cheap and easy?" What would you guys say?
What I'm looking for is locations. First of all, you want to try and find some natural areas of deer travel. Inside corners are one of my favorite in hill country. You have a farm field that goes back into a valley, and you can picture a ridge system maybe around it. Well, back in those corners, oftentimes there are flats where the farmer can't necessarily get his equipment in as well. Maybe there's these corners, and they might even be a tenth or 2/10 of an acre. They're tiny, but on those corners, you had these unplanted areas, or the crops just didn't do real well. Know your farmer, talk about, what he's cool with doing and all that. But in those areas, you can get in there and with a cheap mower or a weed whipper or you name it, you can get in there and just get that stuff cut back and clear out an area pretty quickly. I've even seen guys take a chainsaw and just mow with that, just getting these head high weeds down to the ground, and then mowing it up a bit, and clearing a small area on a spot that's already very good. Deer are going to often uh, talk about common routes of travel are going to be coming around those inside corners. They might leak out into that corner. And I just set up a stand in one of these locations the other day, and uh, uh, it's in a position where I can shoot back into the timber, or I can shoot that little pocket out into that area, and I'm able to clear that out. And what you want to do is make sure. I think one of the biggest fails that people have is maybe they just quick mow and throw some seed out. Well, a lot of times that seed's not going to make it. It's going to get choked out. So getting that, mow it, give it a week to rebound on anything that's going to grow, spray it, and that can just be a backpack sprayer, even just a 2-gallon pump sprayer. You can go out there and get the job done, and then throw your seed out on the ground. You don't. A lot of these products, you do not need to work them up, and you can get a catch, especially if you're going to be able to pack it in a little bit and have some good rain coming. So kind of covered the gamut there on where and what, but I think that's what I'm looking for, are those good locations where you can quick scratch in a plot and have a stand hung. That's something you can do in a day or two if you're having to come back and spray and throw the seed down.
Right. So, Tim, Sam kind of covered a good bit of that there. What about if we're trying to throw in a plot off into the timber just a little bit at this time of year? I mean, that feels like it can be a little tougher, and we can come back even if you've got something to offer on, talking about, a food plot or an ag field edge or something like that. But what are your thoughts on a timber plot this time of year?
Yeah, I think when you talk about those wooded plots, the first thing to think about is the size of them. And Sam mentioned this a little bit. This doesn't need to be a half-acre plot. A tenth of an acre, a quarter of an acre, maybe up to a third of an acre. But I think that's even getting aggressive in those wooded areas. You can find an opening that already exists for the most part. Hopefully, it's an area that gets some sunlight. Clear it out, spray it. It can be that backpack sprayer to get some glyphosate on the ground and kill some of those weeds that are coming up. And then it can be as low tech from there as get the seed in the ground, get your metal rake, and just work it into the ground really lightly. I don't want to bring up more of the seed bank that's there already, but I do just want to make sure we have that good seed soil contact. So it can be that simple, right? It doesn't have to be something really elaborate where we have big machinery in there. And that smaller plot is going to be a little more time friendly and budget friendly as well.
Right. And Tim, I've been waiting to ask you that question since I saw your post on social media.
Yeah.
The other day where you had deer kind of hitting the plot already. So and yeah, that's a really really overlooked point. I think we're not talking big plots here. We're not talking forage plots where we're trying to increase the carrying capacity of our property. We're talking kill plots. We're talking I'm trying to find points that deer are going to frequent and to influence their movement during the hunting season. These aren't these don't need to look like big uh, what you would consider like a feeding plot or something like that, where all the deer are going to end up in every single evening. This is just something to influence the deer movement.
Yeah, this time of year we're not changing our property to the point of trying to sustain the herd through the winter. We're trying to improve hunting setups. We're trying to increase
Right.
the attraction to those trails, tree stands. And I think too, you mentioned my reel, and you saw that growth in that small. That's about a 10th acre plot that I put clover in. You do sometimes run into, if you have a lot of deer, they're browsing it quickly, and mine, it came up really nicely, but I've noticed it's kind of stalled out, and you go look at it, and it's because they're grazing it pretty hard.
Right.
And this is something I talked with Sam over text about a week ago. But something to think about if you do get that plot established and you want to try to boost it a little bit, is to then go back in 2-3 weeks later and throw down some rye. That's something I did for the first time last year. But it actually really helped because number one, you're getting more tonnage out of that little plot and you're protecting that clover as the rye comes up. And then number two, as it gets to be those first couple of frosts, your clover starts slowing down. You've got something else. The rye is pretty hardy and it's going to extend the life of that plot further into the season.
Right. And was that a white clover that you put down?
It was a mix. It was primarily a white clover, but it was a mix.
Okay, gotcha. And that white
Yeah.
can be a little bit longer to get established, can take a little
Mhm.
bit more time. Once it's going though, it's gonna, I mean, you won't be able to kill the plot, once it does get going. So, but that one should be a good one for you, especially even heading into next spring as things begin to warm back up. That plot should do pretty well. So, you guys have both mentioned something though that when I mention it, I get some kind of confused looks from time to time. Both of you have said you really don't have to get in there and till the ground up. Scratch it up with a rake, right? Talk to me about that because I think there's this notion that we got to get in there and we got to disc this thing 6 inches deep and then scatter seed. What's going on with that?
Well, Josh, one of the things that I was thinking about with Tim talking on that, and he mentioned coming back and hitting it again with rye. But I like to look at what the seeding rates are. If you're looking at those seeding rates for the typical planting, and those all the food plot seed companies, they're trying to give you the appropriate distribution across a properly established plot. You know how it's planted properly, it's distributed evenly, all these things. That isn't the case when you're doing these types of plots. You're going to
Mhm.
have you're not going to have consistent soil exposure. Your time frames aren't as good. You have a lot of debris, as I was talking about before. You might be starting these things with head high weeds and going from there. So I like to increase the seeding rates, sometimes as much as double. And I know that that might seem excessive, but there's a lot of wasted seed when it's not necessarily hitting the ground. Or the other thing is not necessarily doing it all at once. So you follow the process I talked about before. Maybe you hit it with that, the seeding rate it's called for, but then a week later or 2 weeks later, and again, watching weather. You should just be a weather hawk when you're doing this because your best friend is that 1 inch rain that's coming, and that'll help work that seed into the soil, give it the moisture it needs. And sometimes all that thatch and other stuff that's there as it's breaking up and uh, uh, you know going away over time, it's going to actually help hold that moisture in if the seed can get down. I like to get the seed out there and then even rework it just so and when I say work it, just like a drag, moving that material around, or if it's a lot of thatch, even just mowing it up again, just redistributing that and getting it down, and you're making this thatch blanket, and you're going to have more success with that without ever working the soil. A lot of these products, so oats are great, the brassicas do pretty well on open ground. You still want to get some contact there. You want to roll it in. But once your plots are established, rye is a great one to follow up with. You could just spill that on the ground and it'll grow. And there's some others too that can work depending on the rain you get. Your clovers, your chicories, those can. If you get those out there before a good rain, they can take two, but they take a long, as you guys were just discussing, take longer to establish as well.
Right, right. So let's talk about just real quick. If we said, all right, um, you know, Mr. Hunter, you need these couple of items to make this happen, right? So we've kind of talked about the process a bit. What are the have to have items besides, a strong and willing back ready to do a little bit of labor out there over the next couple of weeks? What are some of the have to have items?
Yeah, you got to have something that's going to get the existing stand vegetation down to the ground. And I think Sam mentioned it earlier. It can be a mower, it can be a weed whip. I think you said even a chainsaw, right? Just something
Yeah,
to get.
or rent a brush mower, a walk behind
Yeah,
brush mower. Those are great.
yeah. So something to get that stand down, and then ideally something to just scratch that ground up a little bit if you can. It could be a metal rake or a drag. And then I don't even know if you necessarily need a seeder. If it's a small enough plot, you can do it a lot of ways, even with putting some holes in a bucket and seeding it out that way. It can be really really low tech if you want to go that route, especially if it's a more remote place where you can't get stuff into.
Right, right. And another thing too, and you know, down here in the South, we love to burn things. So, if you don't want to try to get those weeds down, one thing you can do is go in there and spray it with a backpack sprayer, and come back, either blow or create some kind of small fire break and just burn it. Burn a lot of that, that duff layer or that all that vegetation, and take care of it that way. Leave you with a really nice, clean food plot. So, all right, let's shift then into species or types of plants. We've thrown a lot of them out there. What's maybe the safe bet for the guy that wants to just get something out and growing?
Right.
Rye,
Yep.
rye every time.
Yep.
So a
And are
quick
we?
answer. Yeah,
And
quick
we're
Yeah.
answer, but I would say it depends on your time frame. So I'll jump
right.
in there and say it depends on your time frame. If you have 4 to 6 weeks left in your growing season, I am going to try and get something out there that can be more of a forage product. So that could be grains like oats, peas, beans. Those can go out and still be successful right on the open ground. Or you could do some brassica blends as well to get those out. But no matter what, even with those, the overseeding of rye, with maybe, let's say, 2 weeks left before your frost, you're going to have success and get something green out there. But there's nothing wrong, especially on these quick late season plots, to just have something green. In rye is, a lot of, it's kind of the common response as I just had there, but that is going to be successful in most applications.
Right. And we're talking cereal rye.
That's right.
Correct. So I don't know about up north, but I know down here in the South, ryegrass was a big one. People would actually just
Yeah.
plant the ryegrass, which, yes, they'll forage on it a little bit when it's really, really young and tiny. But for the most part, it's not good. And then you're going to spend the rest of your hunting career trying to get the stuff out of your food plots as you want to plant something else, because it'll never go away.
Right.
So,
Sure.
all right. Anything else, guys, that we need to discuss? Last minute food plots, budget food plots. Maybe a little bit about the sunlight, I guess. We should probably discuss that. What's the level of sunlight? Because, when I think about a plot back in the timber, yeah, for you guys, you're about to start losing your leaves. We're not going to lose our leaves until December where I am. So we've got a long time for that plot to grow without a lot of good sunlight to the ground. How much of a canopy opening do I need to create? Because I don't think it's too late to maybe find a fire break where, all right, it's kind of east-west running, or we're maybe going to get a little bit of sunlight. Maybe we need to take some of these trees out of here to catch a little bit more of that sunlight. I don't think it's too late, but how far are you guys going to go?
Well, one trick, at least for the northern part of the country, is kind of the opposite of what you just mentioned. I want to have those plots orientated north and south.
South.
That
Yep.
sun is coming out of the south this time of year. You're going to get more daylight sunlight if you can have that plot oriented that way. So just a little trick there. If you can find that opening, I may not be able to be that choosy, but if possible, that north-south orientation is going to make a big difference.
Right. Right. Sam?
And for field edges, just like that, I'm looking at south facing. So, if it's that southern edge of a timber, it's going to have more of that light that it can gather. I might look to cut back a couple trees, but usually with this, I'm trying to just cherry pick those best spots that are south facing. I love those corners that are in that, you have a corner of timber that might be predominantly south. That's going to be fantastic.
Right.
And one of the other things, as you're talking about cutting and prepping, to not overlook too is, and I think about this in that application of a corner that I described before, is making sure you cut some trails into the plot from the timber. It's going to make it easier for the deer that may be just cutting around that timbered corner to sneak out in there, and give them that opportunity to get in there more easily. And if you want to talk accessories of plots, make sure you have mock scrape in there. And having that on that trail coming into the plot, maybe call it a staging area just inside the timber from that plot. You want to make sure you can shoot it from your stand, but to have that trail cut in, have a mock scrape on it, and ideally have that right within a good clean shot from your stand.
Very good. Very good. Well, guys, I think that about wraps it up here for food plots on a budget, last minute food plots. If you have any other questions that you've been wanting to ask about last minute plots, then please feel free to either leave it in the comments on our YouTube channel, reach out to one of us. We'd be happy to talk with you about how we can help you get some things done last minute. Thanks for joining me, guys.